Have you ever had to make a decision so gut-wrenching, so soul-shattering, that it felt like your entire world was being ripped apart right in front of you? I'm talking about a choice that wasn't even yours to make, a moment where the people you trusted most in the world pushed you into a corner and forced you to let go of the one thing that meant everything to you. That's exactly what happened to me when my parents made me give up my child for adoption, a decision that's haunted me every single day since, leaving a hole in my heart that I don't know if I'll ever fill. This isn't just a story about loss. It's a raw, emotional journey through love, betrayal, guilt, and the desperate search for closure. I'm going to take you through every painful step. The overwhelming joy of becoming a parent, the crushing moment I was forced to say goodbye, and the long, lonely years of trying to rebuild myself while carrying a grief I can't escape. Stick with me through this, because I'm still wrestling with the aftermath, and I need to know what you think. How do you move on when you've lost a piece of yourself? Let's dive into the hardest story I've ever had to tell. My name's Riley, and I'm 29 years old now, living in a small, weathered apartment in Savannah, Georgia, a city steeped in history with its cobblestone streets, moss-draped oaks, and the slow, humid pulse of the South. Savannah's a place of beauty and ghosts, where the past lingers in every square and the salty breeze off the Savannah River carries whispers of old stories, fitting for someone like me, haunted by a past I can't shake. I grew up in a modest, strict household on the outskirts of town, near Bonaventure Cemetery, in a clapboard house with a sagging porch where the cicadas sang louder than my thoughts most nights. I'm a freelance graphic designer now, working from a cluttered desk by my window overlooking Forsyth Park. But back then, I was just a scared, hopeful 19-year-old, trying to figure out life when it threw me the biggest curveball imaginable. The core of this story, the wound that still bleeds, is about how my parents forced me to give up my daughter for adoption in the spring of 2014, a decision that shattered my world and left me grappling with a grief I didn't know how to name. The key person in this mess, beyond my parents, is my high school sweetheart, Jake, who was 20 at the time, a quiet, kind-hearted guy with dreams of becoming a mechanic, whose life got tangled up in this tragedy just as much as mine did. The emotional conflict tearing me apart was the unbearable clash between the fierce, protective love I felt for my unborn child and the suffocating pressure from my parents, whose rigid beliefs and fear of shame in our tight-knit Southern community overpowered my desperate pleas to keep her. I was caught between the instinct to fight for my baby and the ingrained fear of defying the two people who'd raised me, leaving me drowning in guilt for not being strong enough to stand my ground. The unexpected twist came years later, when I discovered that my parents' insistence on adoption wasn't just about their strict moral code or small-town gossip. It was tied to a hidden family secret about my own mother's past, a revelation that flipped my resentment into a complicated mess of understanding and lingering pain. This story unfolds in Savannah during those turbulent months of 2013 and 2014, with the city's sultry heat, blooming azaleas, and the quiet hum of riverboats as the backdrop to my unraveling life. Every memory is tied to this place. The creak of our old porch swing where I'd cry at night, the scent of magnolias in the air during my pregnancy, the distant church bells that seemed to mock my loss on the day I signed the papers. Memories of those early days with Jake come rushing back as I sit in my apartment now, the soft glow of my desk lamp casting shadows on sketches I've been working on, the distant sound of laughter from the park below, a bittersweet reminder of what I've lost. I think back to when we were just teenagers, 17 and 18, sneaking out to Tybee Island on summer nights, lying on the beach under a blanket of stars, dreaming about a future we thought we could control, laughing about silly things like naming our future dog after a movie character. I remember the day I told him I was pregnant, sitting on a bench in Chippewa Square, the weight of the world on my shoulders as I watched tourists snap photos of the Forrest Gump bench, his hand squeezing mine, promising we'd figure it out together even though fear flickered in his hazel eyes. Now, flipping through old Polaroids I keep in a shoebox under my bed, faded shots of us at the Savannah Jazz Festival, grinning with cotton candy in hand. I wonder how something so full of hope could end in so much heartbreak, and why I couldn't fight harder for what we had. The unraveling of my life started in late 2013, when I found out I was pregnant at 19, a discovery that hit me like a tidal wave during a humid Savannah autumn, the kind where the air sticks to your skin and every worry feels heavier. I was in my first year at a local community college, studying art, working part-time at a diner on Broughton Street, barely scraping by, when a missed period and a cheap drugstore test turned my world upside down. I remember sitting on the edge of my twin bed in my childhood room, the test trembling in my hands, the sound of Mom cooking downstairs a cruel contrast to the panic clawing at my chest, knowing my strict, Church-going parents would see this as a sin, not a blessing. I told Jake first, and though he was scared, he held me close on that park bench, his flannel shirt smelling of motor oil, swearing we'd make it work, maybe get a cheap apartment near his garage job, build a life for the three of us. But the joy of feeling my baby kick for the first time, lying on my creaky mattress with my hands on my belly, was overshadowed by dread every time I heard Dad's heavy footsteps on the stairs, knowing I couldn't hide it much longer. The real storm broke in January 2014, when my parents found out, a moment that still burns in my memory like the sting of Savannah's summer sun on bare skin. I was 5 months along, my bump impossible to conceal under baggy sweaters anymore, when Mom caught me changing in my room, her gasp sharp enough to cut through the silence, her eyes narrowing with a mix of shock and disappointment that made my stomach drop. Dad was worse, his face turned to stone, his voice low and cold as he sat me down at the kitchen table, the smell of burnt coffee lingering, telling me this mistake would ruin our family's reputation in our church community, that I wasn't ready, that adoption was the only right choice. I begged, tears streaming down my face, my hands protectively over my belly, telling them I loved this baby, that Jake and I could manage, but their minds were made up, their words like a vice around my heart, suffocating any hope I had. Savannah's winter chill seeped through the cracked window that night as I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, feeling my daughter move inside me, knowing I was losing her before I even got to hold her. The emotional toll of their decision carved a hollow in me, deeper than the Savannah River itself, as the weeks dragged on and the reality of adoption loomed like a dark cloud over every moment. I stopped going to classes, couldn't face the diner's chatter, and spent hours walking alone through Colonial Park Cemetery, the old gravestones a grim mirror to the death of my dreams, wondering how I could love someone so fiercely yet be forced to let her go. I'd sit on the riverfront at dusk, watching cargo ships glide by, the water reflecting the fading light, feeling like a failure for not standing up to my parents, for not running away with Jake like we'd half-joked about in desperate whispers. Nights were the worst. I'd clutch a tiny ultrasound photo, the only proof I had of her, hidden in my nightstand, sobbing into my pillow as the sound of crickets outside mocked my silence, hating myself for the weakness I felt, for the love I couldn't protect. Savannah's beauty, the pastel houses on Jones Street, the buzz of tourists on River Street, felt like a cruel backdrop to my unraveling, a reminder of a life I'd never share with my child. The day I had to say goodbye, in April 2014, was a wound that never healed, a memory etched into every corner of this city, as vivid as the blooming cherry blossoms that lined the streets that spring. I gave birth in a sterile hospital room at Memorial Health, the antiseptic smell burning my nose, my parents in the waiting area, while Jake held my hand through the labor, his own tears mixing with mine as we knew what was coming. Holding her for those brief hours, her tiny fingers curling around mine, her soft breaths against my chest, was a fleeting heaven before the social worker came in, papers in hand, my parents' stern faces looming behind her, urging me to sign. I remember the pen shaking as I scrawled my name, each stroke a betrayal, the weight of their expectations crushing me as I handed her over to a couple I'd never meet, her cries echoing down the hall as I broke inside. Driving home through Savannah's quiet streets, past the live oaks on Abercorn, I felt empty, the city's warmth a mockery of the coldness in my soul, knowing I'd never hear her laugh or see her first steps. The aftermath was a slow, aching void, stretching through the summer of 2014 and beyond, as I tried to piece myself back together while Savannah moved on without me. I moved out a few months later, unable to stay in that house with my parents' judgmental silence, renting a tiny room near Midtown, working odd jobs while avoiding family dinners, their attempts at normalcy, a slap in the face when I could barely look at them without rage bubbling up. I'd wander through Forsyth Park on weekends, watching families play, kids giggling on swings, each smile a dagger in my chest, wondering what my daughter looked like now. If she had my eyes or Jake's shy grin, if she was happy somewhere out there. Jake and I drifted apart too, the pain too raw to bridge, though I'd see him sometimes at a gas station near his shop, our nods heavy with unspoken loss, a love we couldn't salvage after what we'd been through. Savannah's humid nights, sitting on my fire escape with a cheap beer, became my confessional, where I'd whisper apologies to a child I'd never know, hoping somehow she'd feel them. The unexpected twist came in late 2019, on a rainy November evening in Savannah, when I uncovered the real reason behind my parents' unrelenting push for adoption, a truth that shifted my anger into a tangled web of empathy and unresolved hurt. I was visiting home for Thanksgiving, a tense affair as always, helping Mom clean out the attic to avoid small talk, the smell of damp cardboard and old books thick in the air, when I found a box of her old letters from the 1980s. I shouldn't have pried, but I did, and what I read floored me. Letters from her sister, my aunt, revealing that Mom had been pregnant as a teenager too, forced by her own parents to give up a child, a secret she'd buried so deep even Dad didn't know the full story. She'd pushed me into adoption not just out of shame, but out of her own unhealed trauma, believing it was the only way to protect me from the pain she still carried. Standing there, rain tapping on the roof, I felt a storm of emotions: pity for her hidden grief, frustration that she'd projected it onto me, and a deep sadness that we'd both lost so much to the same silence. Determined not to let this loss define me forever, I started rebuilding in small, painful steps, turning my grief into something I could hold on to. Even as I navigated the complicated truth about Mom's past, I threw myself into graphic design, taking online courses to build a career, working late into the night in my apartment, the glow of my laptop a quiet companion as I designed logos and posters, each project a distraction from the ache. I started a private blog too, anonymous at first, writing letters to my daughter I'd never send, pouring out my love and regrets, describing Savannah's sunsets and the sound of street musicians on Broughton, hoping one day she might read them and know I never wanted to let her go. By 2021, I'd saved enough to move into my current place near Forsyth Park, decorating it with prints of my artwork, each piece a quiet rebellion against the emptiness, though every time I'd pass a playground or see a toddler with a family, the longing would hit like a wave, pulling me under. Reflecting on my past with Jake and the life we could have had became a near-daily ritual, especially on long walks along the Savannah River Walk, the water's slow churn mirroring the turmoil in my heart. I'd think about the nights we'd spent at Wormslow Historic Site, sneaking past the iconic Oak Alley at dusk, planning a future with a crib in a tiny apartment, his quiet promises a lifeline I clung to until it snapped. I remembered the day we picked out a name for her, Lila, after my grandmother, sitting on his rusty pickup's tailgate near East Bay Street, laughing through our nerves, a memory now tainted by the image of him walking away after the adoption, unable to meet my eyes. I'd sit on benches by the river, sketching designs on my notepad, wondering if I'd been too weak to fight my parents, or if their pressure was a force number 19-year-old could have resisted. Savannah's renewal, spring festivals at Riverfront Plaza, the buzz of new art markets, felt like a challenge to my stagnation, a reminder that healing wasn't as simple as a blog post or a new apartment. As the years stretched on, from 2014 to now, I built a cautious distance with my parents, though the unresolved tension lingered like the fog that often cloaks Savannah's marshes. Mom and I had a few stilted talks after I found those letters, her admitting bits of her story in a tearful kitchen confession one Christmas, though she never fully apologized, her guilt a wall between us. Dad stayed silent, as always, his stern face a reminder of the day he forced those papers on me, and I limited visits to holidays, meeting them at neutral spots like cafes on Bull Street, unable to forgive fully but too tired to fight. I kept writing on my blog, now public under a pseudonym, connecting with others who'd lost children to adoption, their comments a lifeline on lonely nights in my apartment, though every story of reunion with a child made my hope and fear spike in equal measure. Savannah's quiet corners, the hidden gardens off Monterey Square, the hush of early mornings by the cathedral, became my refuge, places to wrestle with whether I'd ever seek Lila out, or if loving her from afar was all I'd ever have. The grind of moving forward while carrying this loss felt like trudging through Savannah's sticky summer heat, each step forward shadowed by a past I couldn't escape. I'd run into old friends at events like the Savannah Film Festival, their casual, "How've you been?" questions a minefield, forcing me to smile through half-truths while inside I burned with the secret of Lila, a name I'd never spoken aloud to them. I started avoiding family gatherings beyond the bare minimum, unable to sit through hours of small talk with Mom and Dad, wondering if they ever regretted their choice or if they still saw it as saving me. I even considered searching for Lila through adoption registries, late at night with my laptop open, the hum of my fan mixing with my racing thoughts, but backed out each time, terrified of rejection or disrupting her life, unsure if I had the right after all these years. Driving down Victory Drive alone, past the palm trees and old houses, I wrestled with whether I'd let this loss steal too much from me, or if I'd reclaimed enough by building a life despite it. The weight of judgment, both my own and the silent tension with my parents, didn't fade easily. Even as I pushed forward, each memory of Lila a reminder of how fragile happiness can be. I'd spend hours in my apartment, sorting through old sketches from college, finding doodles of baby clothes I'd drawn at 19, and feel a pang of longing for a life I'd never know, now replaced by a guarded hope when I'd see a new blog comment from someone who understood. I started second-guessing my decision not to fight harder back then, wondering if I'd caved too easily to fear, or if knowing Mom's past would have changed anything if I'd learned it sooner. I'd walk through downtown Savannah on quiet evenings, past the historic homes on Lafayette Square, feeling like a ghost in my own story, asking myself if I'd been too quick to distance myself from my parents, or if that space was the only way to protect what little peace I'd found. The city's charm, the glow of gas lamps at night, the smell of fresh pralines from candy shops, felt like a mockery of my inner struggle, a reminder that moving on wasn't just about surviving, but about living with a void. By early 2023, I'd carved out a life I could call my own, with my design work gaining traction, local clients, a small portfolio site, even a feature in a Savannah arts magazine. But the emotional cost of losing Lila lingered like a shadow over every success. I'd made a quiet ritual of visiting the riverfront on her birthday each April, sitting on a bench with a single daisy from a nearby florist, whispering happy birthday to the wind, hoping somehow she'd feel it wherever she was, a small act of love in a sea of regret. Yet, every time I'd see a notification from Mom, a rare text asking to meet, a holiday card, I'd feel that old mix of anger and longing, wondering if we'd ever truly talk about what happened, or if we were doomed to this surface-level connection. I started volunteering at a local youth art program, teaching kids to draw, their laughter a balm and a blade, unsure if I was healing or just hiding from the bigger questions about my own child. Reflecting on the journey to cope with this loss, I spent a lot of time wandering Savannah's quieter spots, like Wormslow's oak-lined avenue, the ancient trees a somber mirror to my mood as I thought about what I'd gained and lost. I'd remember the early days of pregnancy, sitting in my room with baby books hidden under my bed, dreaming of lullabies while the sound of Dad's sermons echoed from downstairs, a hope now tainted by the memory of signing those papers. I thought about Jake's quiet strength during labor, his hand in mine at the hospital, a bond broken by grief, now just a fleeting wave if I pass his garage on errands. I'd sit on park benches, sketching ideas for new designs, wondering if I'd been too passive.